My name is Kirk. I am the Senior Budget Deputy for Supervisor Mitchell, and it's my honor to get to talk to you today about the county's budget process. I've been with the county for about 15 years. I've done budgets with department, and when I was in the Department of Consumer Affairs, I was part of the Chief Executive Office, working in their strategic integration, budget operations and management, and administrative services divisions. And now I have the honor of serving with Supervisor Mitchell as our budget deputy, and serving with an extraordinary team, many of whom you're going to get a chance to meet tonight. I want to take an opportunity to just kind of walk you through the annual budget process. So we're coming up on what's often the most visible part of the budget. It's when our fiscal year begins on July 1st, and at the end of June, the board passes the budget. But to really think about the budget process, you have to go all the way back to November, when Chief Executive Office begins the budget process for each year by giving information to departments. In November, those instructions come out. In December, departments put together their budgets. In January of each year, they submit that budget. And in February and March, the CEO meets with each and every department to get a hearing on their budget with them individually. In April, the board becomes involved as the CEO brings that and presents that budget to the board. The board accepts the recommended budget, and that begins the annual budget process through the board's review and approval. In May, we have our budget hearing, when the public gets to come and talk with the board supervisors and provide direct feedback. This is a special opportunity that we've had for the residents of the 2nd District. We're really interested in engaging with you and talking about the budget, specifically how it affects people who live and work in District 2. And Supervisor Mitchell wants that extra opportunity for feedback. So we presented this special thing above and beyond the normal budget hearing so that we can have this opportunity to talk about the budget and get some more additional feedback. That's in May. Looking forward to June, the board will the CEO will come back with final changes budget, and the board by the end of June will approve that budget. By July 1st, we then have an approved budget to start the new fiscal year, but the process doesn't end there. Even though the budget year is now started, we're now getting additional information about as we close out the current year's budget and may get new information from federal or state sources about additional funding that's available or new challenges that have come up. So by October, and the CEO will present what's called the supplemental budget, and the board will review and approve that final supplemental budget. That ends the kind of the budget phases. And as you'll notice, it's ended in October, and November, we're starting right up again. But even throughout all of that, there's what's called budget adjustments that can occur throughout the year and also make changes as new challenges or revenue sources open up that have to be addressed outside of the normal budget process. So as you can see, it's not just a one-time conversation that we're going to need to have here. It's going to be an ongoing discussion because throughout the year, there's opportunities to impact the county budget. The county budget this year is going to be over $36 billion. It's a huge amount of money. It provides a lot of resources, but the needs are even higher. We'll find that the number of requests the county gets routinely exceed the available budget, sometimes by as much as $2 billion. And so that's why discussions like this are really important, with limited resources, determining what those priorities could be, where we can, and how we can help. So with my part done here, it's now my honor to turn it over to our policy experts. Our policy experts in each one of these areas will be talking about the individual budget priorities that they'll share. So these are going to be similar to the policy areas of what you see in the poll at the end, but also when you take the survey, you'll be recognizing the individual priorities that they're talking about here as the ones that are coming up. We have a lot of priorities to go through, and so we won't have a lot of time to sit on any individual one, but we want to give you an idea of what our office is looking at and the kinds of things you'll have a chance to weigh in when you complete the survey. With that, first up is Chris. Chris is our Deputy over Justice and Arts and Culture. And Chris will be talking to you right now about our arts and culture budget priorities. So with that, let me hand it over to Chris.
Thank you, Kirk. And for anyone joining late, if you need Spanish interpretation services, you can click on the interpretation icon on the bottom right portion of your screen. Our first arts priority is the Department of Arts and Culture's Community Impact Arts Grant, a grant for arts-based programs provided by social service and social justice nonprofit organizations, which serve more racially diverse and low-income communities throughout the county. Our second priority is relief and recovery grants for arts and culture organizations, which are intended to support nonprofit arts organizations disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, our third arts priority is jobs for artists and arts workers, where funding is provided for creative works projects, which would employ artists and arts workers in community programming to support a variety of reopening and recovery purposes.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for walking us through there. Next policy expert that we have is Kelvin. Kelvin is our Senior Deputy over Human Services and Child Welfare. He'll be walking you through the priorities in that area, child welfare and human services. Kelvin, let me hand the mic over to you.
Thanks, Kirk. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Kelvin Driscoll here. Pleasure to be with you all tonight to walk you through Supervisor Mitchell's Child Welfare and Human Services budget priorities. You have a number of priorities on your screen. I'll really place them in 4 buckets for you. Starting first with child welfare. We're really concerned here around prevention services. And so making sure that we target services as early upstream as possible to make sure that children and families in LA County do not come in contact with our systems if they don't need to. A big priority for the supervisor, of course, given her background, is early care and education, which also includes our maternal health and child health investments. And so really making sure that the youngest residents of LA County have all the support that they need in their prenatal time all the way up until the age of 5. And we've certainly seen in this pandemic how those investments in making sure that we have quality care and education is really important. This area also includes investments for our commercially sexually exploited youth. And so we wanted to make sure that victims of human trafficking have all the supports that are necessary as they're navigating those difficult challenges. Racial equity and equity in general has also been a priority that you will hear the supervisor often lift up as a part of her tenure on this board. And so making investments in our anti-racism, diversity, and inclusion initiative are going to be huge priorities for the supervisor, which includes ensuring that the infrastructure is there to carry out many of the initiatives that are home to ARTI, which we call for short. This also includes some investments in our LA versus Hate program, which is the county's program to combat hate countywide in the county. And you may have heard this program mentioned recently with the rise in hate in some of our AAPI communities. Food insecurity and our digital divide are the last 2 areas. And again, kind of what we've seen as a theme of the supervisor's budget priorities this cycle is about recovering from the pandemic better than before. So we've certainly seen how food insecurity has risen to the top as a need during this pandemic. And so the supervisor is very focused on making sure that our most impacted communities have food on the table, frankly. And so this means leveraging all of the counties and federal and state resources. But you've also probably seen the supervisor's food bank and food giveaway initiatives that are happening across the county. And we know that now is not the time to let up on those supports, but to push even harder to make sure that those resources continue to be available to the most vulnerable in the 2nd district. And lastly, we've certainly seen with the transition to a virtual environment over the last year and some change in the pandemic, particularly for our students and those working at home, that access to stable and affordable internet services has been a huge issue. And so bridging the digital divide, with the infrastructure and the resources that are necessary to make sure that we deliver those services and we deliver broadband across the county rounds out the budget priorities for my policy portfolio. Kirk, I'll hand it back to you.
Excellent. Kelvin, thank you so much. Really appreciate you walking us through all those. All right. Next up, we have Carolyn. Carolyn is our Senior Workforce Development Economic Opportunity, and that's exactly the area she's going to be covering right now with Workforce and Economic Opportunity. Carolyn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kirk. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here. It's great to see everyone. Carolyn Terosas working on economic development and workforce development, which is so important for our office as we recover from the pandemic. So you will often hear Supervisor Mitchell talk about equity being at the forefront of everything that we are doing. And of course, that is not any more true than it could be in economic development. So first, I want to just mention the different buckets in which we're looking at serving our populations that have been the hardest hit by COVID, most left behind, and also make sure that we're helping our small businesses. So at the top of all of that is the contemplation of a new county department really focused on economic advancement and opportunity, and making sure that that department has those resources in order to build back better. Secondly, looking at how we're serving our homeless population and our homeless job seekers. We know that we've housed more people than ever before, but we also have more people falling into homelessness each year than ever before. And so for those who are able to work and who can work, ensuring that we're able to match those job seekers to quality high road employment, and also make sure that we're focusing on our youth job seeker population, whether those are youth experiencing homelessness, youth involved with the justice system, foster youth, et cetera, making sure that there are opportunities for professional development and career pathways. And then also ensuring that we're working with our justice involved, both youth and adults, to navigate through returning back home and making sure that we attach those individuals to quality high road employment. Also making sure that we are continuing our Fair Chance campaign to destigmatize hiring from our reentry population. You'll often hear Supervisor Mitchell talk about right-sizing the criminal justice system, and we need to make sure that we focus on our reentry population there. Additionally, promoting equitable financial stability as we start to recover from COVID-19 is very important. So in order to do that, making sure that we fully fund and staff our Center for Financial Empowerment to help individuals build wealth and capital. Additionally, making sure that we are promoting equitable financial recovery through developing safe and affordable products for our small businesses, whether those are loans or also grant opportunities, making sure that we are dedicating sufficient funding to grants as businesses stay open and recover from COVID-19, and making sure that we're targeting those grants with an equity lens. We know that there are several studies out there about businesses that received relief during the pandemic, and we know that that was not proportionate across the county and certainly not across the 2nd district. So making sure that we're dedicating those resources to promote our small businesses, especially our small businesses of color and women-owned businesses. And then finally, making sure that we are expanding entrepreneurship opportunities, especially communities where they may not necessarily have had access to loans, grants, lease space, technical assistance, and mentorship. So making sure that we're helping those entrepreneurs build their business up through that we invest in the 2nd district. And with that being said, I will go ahead and pass it back to Kirk. Thanks so much.
Right, thank you, Carolyn. Just a quick reminder for people, the chat function is available for you to respond to and react to any of the stuff that you're hearing. We're going to be saving all of that and are really interested in hearing your comments and your feedback that we get through that, and kind of being able to look back and see your real-time responses to what's being said. And if you have questions, we can stick them in there too. And our policy experts may have the opportunity to go back and answer some of those questions following their presentations. So please feel free to use that. Next up, we have Laura. Laura is our Senior Deputy over Environmental Justice. She'll be talking here about environmental justice and sustainability. Laura, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kirk. Excited to be here this evening and glad to see everyone here. And this area of the budget priorities are really focused on addressing environmental inequities, closing existing gaps, leveraging our public investments, and really leading as a public sector to ensure long-term equitable environmental sustainability. And so some of our priorities include expanding electric vehicle charging stations, developing energy efficient retrofits in county facilities, ensuring that we have the funding and staffing for adequate regulation, inspection, and enforcement of industrial waste permits and other polluting facilities. We're looking at opportunities to ensure stormwater capture and water quality improvements that actually create green space and multiple benefits. We're also want to prioritize increasing inspections and monitoring at oil and gas wells, which are disproportionately located in our district. And lastly, we'd like to see expanded green jobs and retraining, workforce development initiatives for fossil fuel workers in impacted communities. And I think that is it for me. I will turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, we're going to be talking about health and mental health. Yolanda is our Senior Deputy over Health. She's not able to join us today, so I'll be walking you through these. Make sure to share the picture and her name so that you can connect with our team and know who our experts are in each one of these areas. So in the area of health and mental health, we have a number of really high priority items I want to share with you, including our Office of Diversion and Reentry, set up to help move people back out of the criminal justice system and help them to have fulfilling experiences outside of that. Our skilled nursing facilities is an issue that came up with a really bright focus during COVID, and making sure that we have the resources available in our skilled nursing facilities to take care of our most experienced and elders in our community. The Office of Violence Prevention was set up to deal with the increase in gun violence and the prevalence that we've been seeing there, and also just help deal with issues related to violence in general. Youth mentorship is a key thing we want to keep in front of us, an ability for our more experienced people to provide guidance for our youth. The promotora and health promoter efforts, a way of disseminating information and help doing it in a culturally relevant way that meets people where they are to provide that information. Doula services to help provide those with pregnancy and helping through that part of your life. The Restorative Village at Harbor UCLA campus, and expanding the availability of mental health beds throughout our community to make those more available and meet the needs that we have in those areas. I also wanted to do a little bit more in the health and mental health area. We also have expanding diversion-related services, tracking metrics, and moving towards the closure of Men's Central Jail. We have the need for recuperative care beds and services. And finally, at the Martin Luther King Medical Campus, the construction of a new parking structure. All right. With those, I'm now going to introduce Isela. Isela is our Senior Deputy over Homelessness and Housing, and she'll be talking to us both about homeless and housing items that are priorities. So Isela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kirk. Y nomás como recordatorio para los que se acaban de unir, la reunión también está con interpretación, so pueden presionar el icono que está abajo que dice Interpretation y seleccionar Español. And thank you all for your comments that are coming through. We appreciate that. Just to uplift, we're not going to go into specific details with all of the different programs. So some of the questions on specific populations, we're taking note of it and including on there. So for homelessness and housing, you know, our Supervisor Mitchell and our team really believes there isn't just one silver bullet to solve the challenges that are faced in our county and really our region. So you'll see I have a couple more slides than maybe my colleagues do on some of these areas. So I'll go over some of them, but generally our approach and our priorities are really about continuing the current services and programs that are supporting people experiencing homelessness and being able to go upstream and focus on building new housing so that we can prevent people from falling into homelessness, as well as protections for tenants and home ownership opportunities for people. So on this slide, I'm going to highlight that we are uplifting being able to upgrade our existing shelters. So it's also about sustaining existing infrastructure, being able to have those opportunities for rapid rehousing. So when folks are experiencing homelessness, that we can have them be in shelter and be in homes while we can support them into getting into permanent housing. Another program that we're uplifting here is supporting safe parking for folks living in their cars or RVs, and the support services that go along with being able to outreach to those folks and be able to bring them into those spaces, and mental health for folks that are experiencing homelessness that have mental health needs and those services. Next slide. Another area that we're looking at is board and care facilities, and really spaces where people that need support to take care of their daily needs, whether because of physical disability, or mental disability, that we have those spaces for them. We want to make sure that that also is inclusive of seniors. I saw a note earlier and a message about people that are in elder ages and being able to support around housing. We also want to make sure that we have resources for the encampments that we see throughout the county, right? That while we're being able to provide the housing for folks, that we are also managing where those encampments are. Within housing, we are uplifting a couple specific populations, including people that have been victims of domestic violence, as well as folks that have been justice involved, and making sure that we have those supports as people are transitioning out of being incarcerated, that they are able to also have housing. And the last point on here is linked to being able to have those facilities for folks that need additional care, and we call that recuperative care campuses that allow for continued health support for people that maybe aren't quite in need of emergency care, but still need some more support around health and wellness. Next slide. And then on housing, we're uplifting here the construction of affordable housing, having diversity of opportunities around ownership, including community land trusts, where there could be collective ownership of land and home, as well as individual home ownership. And within home ownership, we're uplifting, supporting programs of mortgage relief to homeowners and small landlords. And so it's not only about new home ownership, but also ensuring that we sustain folks that are in their homes, and how those assets can be transferred on to other family members as individuals see fit. And here we're also uplifting resources for rent relief. Again, in order to tackle our homelessness challenge in the area, being able to support those programs that prevent people from falling into homelessness is really important as well. And looking at strategies around increasing potentially banking of land or purchasing land that we could hold for future development, potentially along the river, given that the river master plan is in place and there's opportunity there to have development. And last on this slide is around accessory dwelling units, which is sometimes referred to as a granny flat, but really being able to have like a second unit in a property that can support wealth building and generation and income generation for homeowners, as well as additional housing units for our region. Next slide. And on this slide, we're emphasizing the focus on our programs that support tenants. So we have a great program in the county. It's called Stay Housed LA, that actually brings together counseling and support services, as well as legal services for folks that are potentially facing eviction. We have a tenant protection hotline that really, again, supports connecting people to resources as well. Both we have also support for landlords, so that they're aware of their responsibilities and their rights, as well as any resources for them. And the county, we have a rent stabilization ordinance that really allows, again, to extend those protections for people that are tenants. And then also uplifting the potential for support for legal claims for any back rent, particularly for folks that have been challenged to pay their rent due to COVID. So again, as I started this conversation, that we don't see just one silver bullet for solving our housing challenge and crisis here in the region. We're looking at the whole spectrum of continuing to support those programs that help people that are experiencing homelessness, looking at preventing people from falling into homelessness, and increasing opportunities for folks to be able to own their home, whether individually or collectively. And I believe that's the last point on my slide, and I will pass it back to Kirk.
All right, thank you so much for going through all of those with us. We have John. John is our Senior Deputy over Justice, and he'll be walking through our justice-related budget priorities for us. John, over to you.
Thanks so much, Kirk, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight this Thursday evening. Really appreciate you. Si habla español, la reunión está disponible en español, oprima interpretation y elija Spanish. So this list is not as long as Isela's. part of that is intentional. There's some examples that we're going to talk about, but also justice in District 2 is housing, justice is healthcare, justice is the arts. You know, we believe in thriving District 2 communities. And so all these areas are very important, what's happening with justice and public safety. But really quickly, well, I'll try to be brief, but thorough enough. So we'll start with holistic indigent defense. Our public defense is one of the most important services that the county provides to vulnerable and low-income communities. This is a priority. We want to make sure these are funded, especially given the COVID-19 pandemic and the backlog of cases that we've seen. This is, threatening the constitutional rights and, due process for millions of residents. Quickly, the Family Assistance Program. The goal of this program is to provide compassionate communication and provide trauma-informed support to families who lose a loved one following a fatal use of force or death associated with an officer or deputy-involved use of force. I saw the chat was lighting up. Fund Peacemakers is not on this list, but I'm here for it. Urban Peace Institute is doing amazing work. We hear you. LA Justice Fund. The idea is to fund a permanent and comprehensive structure for the LA Justice Fund, LAJF, and they provide detention and deportation defense to immigrants. This is, sorry, I want to make sure I'm going in the right order. Creation of Tribal Relations Office or initiative. So this came up because we hear our, Native American, Alaska Native brothers and sisters calling for more support. Justice impacts them as well. So the idea is to create a Tribal Relations Office or initiative within the Strategic Integration Branch of the Chief Executive Office. Breaking Barriers is a groundbreaking program that provides housing, case management, and employment training to individuals on felony probation in LA County. They're underfunded. We need to support that. And then also looking at sheriff training on trauma. For example, the work of the LASD's MET team is underfunded. It's doing great work. I see Sergeant Bojorquez in the chat, so we want to support that too. So these are just some examples, but we're here to listen to you. We see the chats lighting up, see the Q&A. So looking forward to continuing this conversation. Thanks, y'all. Gracias por todo.
All right, John, thank you so much. Appreciate you doing that. Next up, I want to introduce you to Armene. She's our deputy handling military and veteran affairs. Although Armene wasn't available to join us tonight, I'll be walking through the items in military and veteran affairs. And so the two items that we have in this area are improving appointment system and call center for the military and veterans affairs team, and then also providing diversion and reentry services for veterans. Given the sacrifices veterans have made, the investments seem to be really well placed into helping them through these challenges. All right, next up, I'm going to invite Laura back onto the stage. She's our senior deputy over environmental justice, and here she'll be talking with us about parks and recreation and open space. So Laura, it's back to you.
Thanks, Kirk. And very much connected to our environmental justice priorities. This area is really about how we can create additional parks, open space, and access, which is really created through recreation programming and other programs that really facilitate safe and accessible use of these parks and green spaces. So some of these priorities include expanding recreation programming at parks, as well as aquatic and pool programming. I saw in the chat someone weigh in on golfing, and so youth sports, providing free access to sports programming is something that the county has done, the Parks and Recreation Department has done. And I think tied to John's comment, these are all important programs that actually provide activities for young people to take place in, and really are also connected to justice and building a thriving community. Increasing parkland, green space, and trails is really critical, as we know that our district is disproportionately impacted by poor land use decisions that have really resulted in a lack of green space. And so also improving the amenities at parks like playgrounds, as well as maintaining our parks and beaches. And then lastly, just ensuring that we have education programming that includes beach safety and other education and recreation programming. And that's it. I'll turn it back to Kirk.
All right, thank you so much. So I'd like to introduce you to Lily. Lily's our Senior Deputy over Infrastructure and Transportation. Lily's currently serving supervisor in another meeting right now. And so I'll be stepping in. I'll be able to talking to you about our transportation and infrastructure priorities. So our first one up is something you've heard about a little before. It's expansion of anti-racism and diversity. Although this bullet is really put to public works and seeing how this can be impacted through public works contracting and our public works activities. And the benefits that we can see through those kind of activities in the public works realm. We then have a trio of traffic safety improvements, and I'll walk through with each one of those. The first one is collision corridors, and these are areas where we notice a very high amount of pedestrian accidents where pedestrians are being hit, and the safety measures that can be taken to make things more safe in the pedestrian automobile interface. Next up is drag racing prevention. This relates to some of the recent things that we've seen with high-speed accidents and particularly around events that are these kind of illegal racing. And our third one is bus and bike mobility. It's utilizing these ways, trying to reduce our carbon footprint and make more sustainable choices through our design work and really designing streets and roadways that promote buses and bikes and helping them move through. Street cleaning is one of the areas that we want to lift up. And keeping our streets clean for everyone that's using them. Electrification infrastructure to provide that type of basic infrastructure that we need for our power grid. Homeless encampments, also a similar thing. It's kind of been a homeless issue. Here we're highlighting it in terms of public works cleanup. Going in there, having our public works staff who can clean up these homeless encampments. And the final one is graffiti abatement, trying to keep our community clean and free of graffiti. So with that wraps up our priority section. And now is our chance to get some feedback from you in a new way. So I've loved seeing the chats, all the stuff, the feedback we've been getting there. That's wonderful. Thank you. Now it's time for our poll. So a poll is gonna be coming up. There it is on the screen. And what we're asking for is for you to rate your top policy area. So our policy experts have gone through and now in real time, we're going to be able to see as people respond and select the policy area in this poll that is most important to them. So I'm going to take a minute so people are able to fill this out, and we'll just be able to see where this goes. People are making their selections here. I want to thank you again for the huge level of participation that we had in this event. We were so excited to see so many people registering for this. So many people have taken the surveys. We've had hundreds of responses already. I think we're gonna have more after tonight. And I'd like to thank all of our supervisor and all the deputies for making this a priority and helping us to put together the information that we were able to provide tonight, and then taking their time with the deputies to be here and talk about these priority areas and share this information with you. We're gonna be leaving the poll open for about 30 more seconds so that we can make sure everyone gets a chance to go in. And then kind of what we're seeing so far in the group that's here tonight, it looks like homeless and housing and health and mental health are taking up about half the responses are coming back in those two areas. It's just really helpful for us. It's really helpful to get to see and get that immediate feedback here on how this is going. So as we come up on the 2-minute mark here, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. Last few seconds, if anyone else wants to put in their last minute vote. All right, and we are going to go ahead and close. So here are our final results. And it looks like homelessness and housing was our most popular response for tonight, with 32%, almost 1 out of every 3 people who responded selecting that area. That's really important, and that actually aligns with a lot of the other conversations that we've been having about the impact that homelessness and housing has in our district particularly, but in the county as a whole. So it's really helpful for us to see that validated and see that here. But I appreciate the spread of other areas where we're seeing a lot of support in other areas as well. We're a diverse community, and that we have there's a lot of different things we care about. And I recognize we only gave you the option of one. If we gave you the option of many, this could have looked a little different because people may have many of these they're interested in, and we understand that. All right. So with that, I'm going to let the poll go away, and we'll be moving on to the next section of our discussion.
I think that's me, Kurt, right?
Trying to get, there we go. So yeah, so I have the honor of introducing Frederica. She is the Chief of Staff for Supervisor Mitchell. She's our fearless leader in the office and helps lead many of our highest priority projects. It's a joy working with her, and it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. Frederica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for your budget expertise. And I know it may have felt like a whirlwind in us getting a lot of the information to you, but we thought it was high priority. One of the major goals of the supervisor, and she does apologize for not being able to be here. I noticed there was one of the questions in the chat about transportation, the Metro issue. The supervisor is actually at the Metro board meeting right now. She, as her seat on the Board of Supervisors, she also has a seat on the Metro board, and those budgets are handled separately. Actually, Metro is looking at its budget tonight, looking at its $8 billion budget tonight. And so that is why the supervisor isn't with us this evening, but she does send her regrets, and she knew she had left it in good hands with Kurt and the rest of our policy team. Again, my name is Rika McGee, and I serve as the Chief of Staff for Team Mitchell and the 2nd District, and really throughout LA County. Our concerns are county-wide of the policy issues that we're looking at. There were some questions in there about food deserts and things like that. We are addressing, trying to address some of those issues. Some of them may not happen in the budget setting. So I just used by way of example, the question that was in the chat about food deserts. Our office is working on different construction programs and trying to urge different grocers to come into the community. One of those such sites is at Vermont, Manchester, that had been one of the locations of the '92 riots, Rodney King, following the Rodney King verdict. And so that lot had remained vacant for several years. Seed School will be there, one of a seminal program where it actually is a dormitory type housing for youth to be able to have college prep education. And as part of that project, not only is there affordable housing for seniors, I believe 60 units, and then a several number of units that are, the goal is to be available for families that will also have a multi-use function that we hope to bring into a grocery store into that plan. So you'll see that we're attacking some of the needs of the community from various directions. Your budget tells you your policy and your priorities. And so unlike, just like your house budget, we wanted to get your feedback to determine what our priorities should be in requesting some things that were not laid out in the CEO's budget as she presented it to the board as well as to the public over the last month. And we do need to be strategic. So that's why your input was invaluable to be able to have a list of items. Clearly, a lot of our items on the list will be related to the homeless issue that we are experiencing in LA County. And so, and that'll be reflected as was in your survey results. But tonight is not the only time that those survey results are coming in. We actually started putting the survey out on social media as well as on our website earlier this week. You may have not had an opportunity to look at the survey results, but I was actually talking to my sister who lives in Carson, who was going over it this morning. So some of the your other neighbors have been looking at it. So all of the participants' survey results will be reviewed. We will be burning the midnight oil tonight and early tomorrow because our unmet needs letter is due to the CEO's office by late tomorrow. And so our goal is to take the information that you provided in the chat, as well as some of the question and answers, and try to be responsive to that as we put forth our letter to the CEO's office. We are recording it. I believe that this, but probably it's going to be available on our website a little later after we get everything out. But this will be the beginning of our budget conversations. You've seen us have these conversations early when we had the rescue plan funds that were, we first started hearing about the LA County getting 1.9 billion. We did the same process. This will be what you can expect from Team Mitchell and from Supervisor Mitchell about how we engage you to understand what you identify are the greatest needs. We do not like a paternalistic approach to, I think that we can tell you best what you need. And so that is really the goal of this. So again, one other question that I noticed in the chat said, what about a crime question? That is really general. So when you're talking about a budgetary question about crime, the question is how do you have those resources available? So is it crime relating to, the high-speed chases or that are going on? We had some of those involved in there. Are you talking about ways to prevent recidivism? We had some of those things in there to prevent some of those things. We talked about mental health services. Measure J passed in November, and we're talking about reimagining justice. And so how can we address crime communities in a more proactive way, and being able to address the issue of crime, but also meeting the individual needs of that individual and perhaps some of the victims and survivors of those crimes to make sure they flourish following any incidents that may have happened in their community. One big thing that is not specifically related to this overall budget, but many of you probably have heard some of the news reports about the county embarking on a study about income. We've gotten a lot of questions. It is really in the early stages. I wanted to touch on that for you. That would be funded out of our rescue plan fund. The goal is to fund $1,000 for over a 3-year period for 1,000 people. It is the study, the similar programs have existed in Stockton. There's currently one going on in the city of Compton. City of Los Angeles is considering the same discussion right now about guaranteed income, and so is the County of Los Angeles. So in the next few, in the next few months, definitely in the next month, you will begin to hear more about that specific program. But as we move across all of these policy areas, we'd love for you to stay engaged. We did also put into the chat box a link to our website that has all of our team's individual names, their email address, and the way to be able to contact us, and photos, which Lene was really insisted on us doing as a team. Supervisor Mitchell is very proud of the diversity of our team, that we hope to reflect what the second district looks like, and meeting the needs, that we had translation available tonight. John shamed us all and busted out his Spanish for you all. And I tapped my hat to John, appreciate that. I want to be like him when I grow up, to be bilingual and just roll that off my tongue like that, but soon I will be, that's the goal. But if there are any other questions, please put them in the chat. Again, we appreciate you setting the time in your evening for being here. The next budget steps will be happening where the board will actually vote on the budget, and they'll do final changes, is what we call it. That will be happening in June, so in the next few weeks. And then there will be what we call the supplemental budget, as Kurt referred to on the top of the hour, where late September, right in that phase, early October, we'll be looking to do changes, because you'll remember the state budget happens in mid-June, and it's funded July 1. Those funds become available, and those state funds can impact our budget. And so hopefully in a positive way. We've had some of we've gotten more money than we thought we were going to have at state level. And that's always a good problem to have. As our state elected officials bicker over how to best use those resources as we recover from this pandemic, both the physical, medical portion of it, the economic portion of it, and particularly to our small businesses. So we want you to know we're here to support you, and we hope that the budget that is ultimately passed by the board is one that would reflect some of the things that you've identified as your needs, but believe that Supervisor Mitchell will be fighting for those items as well. Kurt, is there anything else?
So we really just want to encourage people, you mentioned it, that was perfect about the survey. The survey, our budget survey, our online survey will remain open through tonight till about 8 p.m. And we really recommend that anyone who has not had a chance yet to go and fill that out, please do so. We've been getting some really amazing feedback through there. It gives us the opportunity to, for you to identify individual priorities that are most important, policy areas that are important, and also just an open section for any areas that we haven't touched on or you want to provide a little more clarity on. It gives you the chance to provide us that information. And we really do read all of that, and it's extremely helpful for us to help get that kind of feedback. So if you haven't had a chance to go on that survey, please do. It's available in the chat, and it will be open, but we're asking you to do it tonight. And with that, I think that wraps us up. Any final words?
Nope, again, we appreciate your time. John, were you trying to say something?
I was just thanking Kirk for facilitating and moderating.
All right.
Thanks for everybody for joining us.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. We appreciate your time. Take care. Have a good evening.